Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Tekken Tips Sundays on a Saturday. It's typically on a different day. Today's going to be a pretty short episode, but before we get started into our Tekken tips, I just want to briefly mention why I didn't cover CEO. Or I guess I'll cover it now very quickly. I didn't think there was much to take away, right? We had two kind of outbreak players, which was nice, and Kaiser and Genghis Dawn, two Americans who tied for fifth place. But other than that, I didn't really feel there was too much noteworthy, right? So we know if you're a character specialist with a unique playstyle and are very good, you can beat anyone in a first to two on any given day, right? We've seen a lot of examples of this in the past. Boa loved the iMusician. This isn't the first time, but of course, it's always exciting when it happens with Kaiser's Lucky Chloe. We knew Arslan Ash was the best player in the world. We knew he was going to win the tournament. It really felt like Dynasty Warriors kind of game where he was just destroying everyone. We knew Anakin was the best American player and, definitely a world class international player, probably a top 10 player in the world. I do think the fact that he got a few games on Arslan is noteworthy. But I'm not going to read too much into it, just because it was clear that Arslan kind of had the situation under control, and Anakin uh, needed some pretty big, hard reads to get those games. But so that's CEO. That's kind of why I didn't make a full episode recap on it. Hopefully, the next big international major will really have more international representation, so we can kind of uh, dig into what happens a bit more. Okay, so first Tekken tip is what I want to call one-shot adaptation. Why it's important, what it is, and kind of how to apply it. So I'll just give an example, a personal example. So recently I was playing a Jack player, and they had a flowchart of two moves. So it was two jab, which is one of Jack's best tools, two jab down back one, right? So high low, but the two jab will connect at a deceptively long range, but not as long range as down back one. So if the two jab is blocked, the down back one, assuming I am blocking, will almost always hit based on the range. Um, so it's not a bad little 1-2 attack, but this player was doing it a lot. And of course, I was just taking it because I was like, these down, I can take this down back one. You know, if I duck, I might get launched, and it's just not worth it. So I was taking the down back ones, and then I was like, this isn't even a mix up for this opponent. This is just a flowchart that they do. And so I'm gonna wait until when I need it to get a low parry and to make a comeback. So it was a final round situation, final round. Well, actually, it wasn't a set. It was just we were just playing. So I guess final round situation. I'm down in health, and I pull out the low parry on the string. Right, I bait out the two jab just by footsies into the down back one. Um, I bring the Jack player to the wall, and I'm playing with Devil Jin, and this is a really great scenario, and I'll probably win the round. This Jack player sees that I low parry. And in fact, this wasn't just a flowchart. This was a mix-up that this Jack player was planning on. Because when they stand up at the wall, I apply the forward 1+2 cancel, just to see what they do. And they do two jab after Devil Jin's forward 1+2, which is that homing wall bounce that is cancelable. They do two jab late to punish, so it didn't punish my forward 1+2. And naturally, I was like, okay, I got the low parry once, let's just end this. I go for the low parry again, and they do down forward two. So this is an example where my opponent did one-shot adaptation. So what is one-shot adaptation? It's the first time you see something different in a pattern of your opponent. you adapt to it the first time. So, for example, you do not do, again, if you're trying to do one shot adaptation, they do something different, and then you're like, okay, well, next time they're not going to do that thing again. They're going to go back to what they've been doing. And kind of like the problem with that is it's just a bit too slow. In some cases, if it's a really risky situation, it makes sense to be a little bit more, conservative. So in that case, maybe I should have just blocked because again, I did eat the down forward too. But Tekken, the faster you play it, the better you are essentially, or the better you can be. And this one-shot adaptation rule allows you to, one, get potentially high damage situations, right? So a launcher. And two, forces you to pick up on patterns at a very minute level, right? Because this doesn't have to be a two-hit move. This could be a move into movement, right? The second I see a player do something like a -3 move into like a sidestep right, without me having initiated that, that's a one-shot adaptation opportunity. And next time they do that, I'm doing a homing move because you got to check: is it a flowchart or is it something they're actively thinking about? Because if it's a flowchart or if it's a really bad habit, then that's a whole round in Tekken 7, right? You can exploit that for a round. Um, and so this Jack player actually dropped the combo like instantly. It was an instant drop. It was two jab, down forward two into like a whiff. I don't remember what move they whiffed, but into a whiff. And they stood up, and I stood up, and naturally, this always happens. This is another kind of tip that might be its own episode. When a player drops a combo, they're typically likely to do something kind of risky because there's this kind of feeling of like, I dropped a combo, I need to get that reward back. I need to get that damage back somehow. And so the second I stand up with a back roll, uh, two jab, I say, okay, I'm gonna one shot adaptation this because let's see what happens, right? If I one shot adaptation, what does it mean? It means I don't go for the low parry again, right? I went for it one time, it worked. One time I got down forward two. The last time I got down forward two. So now I'm going to assume it's a down forward two coming. And I blocked the down forward two. And the situation was their back was against the wall. I get a back 2-1 punish, or back 1-2 punish, excuse me, with Devil Jin. So that's a wall splat into his absurd wall combo. And that was the round. And so we both had like two one-shot adaptation exchanges that both led to big damage. Well, one was a drop combo, but this is kind of a tip that will help you both play fast and not play afraid of opponents, right? Because if you're in your head, you're like, this opponent is so advanced with this mix up that if I wait and see what they do a third or second time, like maybe I'll get more information. No, just check that. One shot, one time, check it. And that one check gives you way more information than if you wait. Because if you wait, and let's say they start mixing it up, then you kind of have doubts because then you're like, okay, maybe they're just doing this randomly. But if you see a pattern and you adapt to it once, you're like, okay, that's probably an attack or offensive tool that they kind of have ingrained, or a defensive maneuver that they kind of have ingrained in their play. So that's the first Tekken tip. Second Tekken tip of today is building out and building up your mix-ups. So I'm going to talk again about Law. I know there's a lot of Law. I could talk about other characters with this, but I'm going to talk about Law just because it's my main and I can give the most detailed commentary. But please adapt this to your own character, whatever character you play, or whatever characters you play. because it's kind of a universal tip. So I'll give another example after law, but we'll start with law. So with law, slide mix-up is, of course, pretty good, or very good, mainly because the low is you don't get a full launch punish, you get a float punish on it. Um, but the thing is, law's mids out of the mix-up are a bit dicey, right? Because you have two launchers out of the mix-up. You have wall standing 2, which is launch punishable. You have forward forward 4-3, which has an execution barrier and is a bit slower because you have to do a crouch dash or a crouch cancel motion. You have wall standing 1-2, which is genuinely, I think, is a pretty bad option because when you get to a high level, everybody's going to duck the second hit if they block it. The second hit of wall standing 1-2. And then you have wall standing 4, which is kind of like almost nothing in terms of damage. You also have forward forward 2, very sidesteppable, and you also have wall stand or back 4. Both of those require high execution, and both of those don't. One of them is linear in forward forward 2, and the other one doesn't lead to that much reward in back 4. Okay, so then let's break down how you want to approach the slide mix-up if you know that your opponent knows the punishes and is going to punish perfectly, but you need to apply it because law doesn't have other chunky lows, right? To get low damage, you kind of have to go to slide. Otherwise, you're resorting to essentially just pokes. So the way you can start thinking about building up this damage potential is you start with, okay, my slide mix-up, quote unquote slide mix-up, is going to consist of a full crouch 4, full crouch down 4, and while standing 4. These are both very low damage options, right? While standing 4 is like 12 damage or something. Down 4 is like 8 damage or something. While standing 4 might be more than 12, but they're both pretty safe, right? While standing full crouch down 4 is minus 12. A lot of times the punish will whiff depending on the range. While standing 4 is completely safe into DSS. It's plus 17, but it is escapable, right? Like the DSS quote unquote pressure. But so why would you start with that? Well, the reason why you would start with that is you typically don't know how they're going to react to the range uh, and the situation of a range 0 slide mix-up, right? So for while standing 4 to hit, you have to be in range 0, but that's also the range that you'd be applying big launchers, right? Like while standing 2. So you use this either to condition or to data collect, right? So I'm going to say, I'm going to condition into having this player block my down, or get hit by my down 4. And so what effect does this have? One, it is very unlikely that they will decide, okay, I'm going to start blocking that down 4. Because now you're talking about a down 4 or a potential launcher, and nobody is going to eat that launcher unless they have a hard read and they need it, right? They might try and interrupt with a hop kick, but nobody's just going to straight up duck there, probably, unless you're being overly enthusiastic about using the move. So if that is working out consistently, right? So let's say once a round or 2 times a round, you're getting in range 0, you're going for this quote unquote slide mix up, and you're hitting down 4s. Well, then boom, next time you get a slide, right? Because you know they're not going to duck because you've conditioned them in a safe mix-up scenario, a relatively safe mix-up scenario, that ducking's not worth it, right? But then you get a slide, right? That opens up slightly more damage, and by slightly I mean a lot, right? 30 damage. Now we're talking about actual damage that can decide rounds. But we're still going while standing 4, right? So what does this mean? Now the mix-up is while standing 4, totally safe, low damage, or slide, pretty unsafe, but decent damage. and a side switch, right? So depending on who you're playing, that could be a pretty big factor. And now the incentive for the opponent to duck is huge. Because one, you've been applying more lows than mids because you've been using down four and they've been conditioned that that down four is eatable. But they've also been blocking every wall standing four. They're like, oh, this person's just going to do wall standing four for mids, right? But since we moved to the slide, the incentive to duck has gone up, tenfold. But wall standing four is still the only mid kind of in their head. Again, this is assuming, you've applied the mix up correctly and that your opponent is not knee. If your opponent's that much better than you, it's very unlikely that you'll be able to apply this kind of technique. But assuming you're relative to your opponent and or you're just better than them, this will come in handy. Um, so now the incentive to duck is huge. And that is when you can start going for a wall standing two. That is when maybe a forward 4-3 is appropriate. Because if you just go in totally blank with um, a slide mix up and you're mixing up slide and wall standing two, one, you're being risky for no reason. Two, they're going to block the wall standing two when you do it, and you're going to get launched. And it won't have been worth the two slides that you hit or the slide that you whiffed. So you need to use this smaller version of the mix-up to build up the probability that the bigger version of your mix-up is going to work out in your favor. Because going for big launch punishable mix-ups is just not off the bat is not how you win games, right? If you're a Devil Jin player and you're mixing up wall stand, if you're mixing up four and hell sweep, or wall standing two and hell sweep off the gate with a wave dash, it's probably not the best. I mean, there's a few exceptions in the world, right? Boa Loveby with wall standing two Kazuya and hell sweep off the gate. But even then, I haven't analyzed his play enough to, definitively say that they're starting off with wall standing two in that fashion. So another example, let's go Raven, Master Raven, right? The snake dash, the quarter circle forward. Out of that stance, you can of course enter full crouch and do her hell sweep. Or you have wall standing two launcher, you have wall standing four as a poke, right? Same principle applies, right? Maybe start snake dash down four. Snake dash, snake dash down three, I think. Pretty much anything safer than your hell sweep, and start with a wall standing four for the mix up, right? Go attack does this. And then either you build up to high damage mix-ups just in the open, or you condition them so that when the big moment comes and you need that mix-up, they're gonna duck, or they're not gonna duck. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this episode. So we went over one-shot adaptation, kind of really useful mindset and thing to be aware of when you're playing someone, and when you're trying to defend. Or go on the offense, right? Think about your own play as well. And then we also went over building up your mix-ups from kind of safer, lower damage situations to more risky, high damage situations, but are more likely to work out because you already have that info from those low damage situations. Okay, so thank you very much. Please let me know if you have any questions on Twitter. The link is my username is in the description. Thank you very much. Have a great holiday season.